In the last part of my story, I told you how my son and his wife abandoned me at the airport. How I spent 2 nights on a hard bench, hungry, invisible, discarded like something useless. And just when I thought I would fade into the background forever, a voice broke through my despair. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Imagine that. After 2 endless days of silence, someone finally saw me. Imagine the shock of being spoken to after feeling like a ghost haunting a terminal. When I lifted my head, my eyes blurred with tears, I saw a young man standing there. He couldn't have been more than 30, with a backpack slung over one shoulder and concern etched across his face. He looked like any ordinary traveler, but to me, he was the first human light in a sea of indifference. I'm fine," I whispered, though my voice cracked. The lie was so transparent that even I didn't believe it. My hands trembled as I clutched my handbag tighter, afraid to admit how far I had fallen. The young man hesitated, then sat down a few feet away. "You don't look fine," he said gently. "Have you eaten?" The question undid me. My throat tightened and shame burned my cheeks. How could I admit that I hadn't eaten in 2 days? That my own son had left me like this? My pride wanted to stay silent, but my body betrayed me. My stomach growled loudly in the quiet moment between us. He didn't laugh. He didn't turn away. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small package, a sandwich wrapped in paper. He held it out to me. "Please, take it." For a moment, I just stared. My hands shook as I reached forward, hesitating as though the simple act of accepting kindness was too much to bear. Then I took it, murmuring, "Thank you." My voice broke on the words. The first bite brought tears to my eyes, not because of the taste, but because it was the first act of compassion I had received since this nightmare began. Bread and cheese. Simple, ordinary food. But in that moment, it felt like salvation. I tried to explain. "My son, he brought me here, but he left me." The words tumbled out awkwardly, heavy with shame. The young man's eyes widened in disbelief. "He left you? Here? Alone?" His voice carried anger, the kind I hadn't even allowed myself to feel. I nodded, unable to speak further. My chest ached too much. He didn't press for details. Instead, he said softly, "I'm sorry. I don't know why anyone would do that to their own mother." The kindness in his tone pierced deeper than any cruelty had. It reminded me of how long it had been since anyone had spoken to me with genuine care. We sat in silence for a while, the noise of the airport swirling around us. For the first time in days, I didn't feel completely invisible. For the first time, someone looked at me, not as a burden or a nuisance, but as a person. When he finally stood to leave, he pressed a few bills into my hand. "Please, at least get yourself something warm to eat later." I tried to refuse, my pride warring with my need, but he insisted. The money crinkled in my trembling palm, heavier than gold. And when he walked away, disappearing into the crowd, I held that kindness close like a fragile flame in the darkness. It wasn't salvation. It wasn't a solution. But it was enough to remind me that not every human heart was cruel, and it gave me just enough strength to face the next impossible step. The sandwich and the kindness of that young man carried me through the morning, like a fragile thread holding me together. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of warmth inside me. But as the hours passed, reality pressed back in with its heavy hand. I was still stranded, still alone, still unwanted. I clutched the few bills he had given me as though they were sacred. With them, I bought a small cup of tea and a piece of bread from one of the airport cafes. The hot drink soothed my throat, but it did little to ease the heaviness in my chest. Once again, I pulled out my phone. The battery was nearly gone, the screen dim from days of overuse, but I tried anyway. I dialed my son's number, my hands trembling as I held the phone to my ear. 1 ring, 2 rings, voicemail. I hung up and tried again, straight to voicemail. "Please," I whispered into the phone, even though I knew he couldn't hear me. Please, just answer me. Tell me why. Tell me what I did. Tears stung my eyes, and I pressed the phone to my chest as if I could pull him back through sheer force of love. But love, I was learning, is not always enough. I tried his wife's number too. The same silence. No answer. No explanation. With every failed call, my hope cracked further. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. They hadn't simply lost me in the crowd. They had chosen this. They had decided I was disposable. That realization sat like a stone in my stomach. I wandered the airport in a daze, dragging my feet, searching for something I couldn't name. A place to rest, a friendly face, an answer. At one point, I approached another staff member, a middle-aged man at the gate counter. I asked quietly if he could check if my son's name was on a flight list, if maybe he had boarded without telling me. The man looked at me with impatience, his eyes flicking over me like I was a nuisance. "Ma'am, I can't give you that kind of information," he said briskly, before turning away to help another passenger. The humiliation burned hotter than hunger ever could. I felt small, invisible, like a child begging for scraps of attention. My voice had been dismissed so many times that I wondered if it had any weight left at all. I walked back to my bench, clutching my handbag tightly, as though it were the only anchor I had left. My body ached, my head throbbed, and I sank onto the hard seat with a heavy sigh. The minutes ticked into hours. I watched people embrace, laugh, argue, run to their gates. I sat still, like a shadow among the living. My son's face floated in my mind, but every time I pictured him, the image twisted. Not the boy I raised, not the man I hoped he'd become, but the stranger who left me here like baggage too heavy to carry. And then, for the first time, I allowed myself to whisper the words aloud, words that cut deeper than any wound. My own son doesn't want me. The sound of my voice saying it made my heart splinter. I clutched my chest, rocking slightly, as though the motion could soothe the unbearable truth. Around me, life moved on, but inside me, something had broken beyond repair. The third night came like a slow punishment. I sat hunched on the same bench, my body stiff and aching, my eyes swollen from crying. The airport no longer felt like a place of movement. It had become a mirror, reflecting my loneliness back at me from every angle. Everywhere I looked, I saw families, children laughing as they ran ahead of their parents, couples sharing quiet smiles, even strangers chatting easily as they waited for boarding. I watched them all, and the thought echoed louder and louder in my head. I don't belong here. I don't belong anywhere. I thought of my husband again, of how we used to talk about growing old together, how he promised I would never face the world alone. He kept his promise as long as he could, but now that he was gone, the one person I trusted to protect me had turned his back. My son, my only son. The boy I had carried for 9 months, the boy whose fever I stayed up all night to fight, the boy whose hands I held when he was afraid of the dark. He had looked at me, not as his mother, but as a burden to cast aside. The betrayal cut so deep it was almost physical. My chest hurt, my breathing shallow. I whispered to myself, why wasn't I enough? Why wasn't my love enough? The truth was unbearable. I wasn't left because I had failed. I was left because they no longer wanted me. And sometimes, that is worse. At that moment, I want to turn to you, the one listening to this story. Tell me, what do you feel hearing this? Does it remind you of someone in your life? Does it make you think of your parents, your grandparents, or even yourself in the future? Please write it in the comments, because when I was sitting there, invisible and broken, what I longed for most was to be heard, to know that my existence still mattered to someone. The airport lights blurred as tears welled again. I pressed the rosary beads between my palms until they dug into my skin, grounding me in the pain. I wondered if this was it, if I would simply fade into the background until my body gave up. Maybe someone would find me eventually, another nameless old woman lost to the world. The thought terrified me. But then another thought flickered through my mind, a stubborn spark. No, I am not finished yet. I had endured too much, loved too deeply, to vanish without a trace. My son may have abandoned me, but I would not let his cruelty be the last chapter of my life. So I stood. My legs trembled, my body weak, but I forced myself upright. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and whispered aloud, "I cannot stay here any longer." I didn't know where I would go. I didn't know who would help me, but I knew one thing for certain. I had to leave that airport behind. And with that fragile determination, I took my first steps away from the bench that had become my prison. The morning I finally walked out of that airport, the air felt different, cold, sharp, but free. I had no plan, no destination, only the certainty that I could not spend another moment sitting on that bench, waiting for a son who would never return. My steps were unsteady, my body weak from hunger and sleepless nights, but each movement forward felt like defiance. With every stride, I told myself, I am still here, I am still alive. Outside, the world bustled with life. Taxis lined the curb, horns blaring, drivers calling out for fares. Travelers hurried past me, dragging suitcases, speaking in languages I barely recognized. I stood frozen for a moment, clutching my handbag, unsure where to turn. And then, as if fate refused to let me fall completely, a woman approached me. She was older than the young man who had offered me a sandwich, but still far younger than me, perhaps in her 40s. She paused, studying my face with an expression that was not impatience but concern. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. The words cracked something in me again. For days I had been invisible, overlooked, discarded. To be seen, truly seen, felt like a gift. I nodded, though my eyes filled with tears. She didn't walk away. Instead, she guided me gently to a nearby cafe. She ordered me a meal. Nothing extravagant, just soup and bread. But to me it tasted like salvation. I ate slowly, tears dripping onto the spoon, unable to hide my gratitude. She listened as I explained, haltingly, how my son had abandoned me. There was no judgment in her eyes, only sorrow. "I'm so sorry," she said. "No one deserves that." Her words warmed me more than the soup ever could. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something stir inside me. Not joy, not even hope, but a reminder that I was still human, still worth compassion. She helped me contact a local shelter, a place where I could rest for a few days. The thought of walking into such a place was humbling, but by then I had already lost my pride. All I wanted was safety, a bed, and a little kindness. And so, I left the airport behind. Not with my son, not with my family, but with the faint light of strangers' compassion guiding me forward. The pain of his betrayal will never leave me. It carved a wound in my soul that cannot be healed, but it also taught me something I never expected, that sometimes love does not come from where you give it, but from unexpected places, from people who have no obligation to you, yet choose kindness anyway. If you are listening now, I want you to remember this. Never, ever take for granted the ones who stood by you when you had nothing left. And if you have parents, grandparents, or anyone who depends on you, please, do not make them feel disposable. The pain of abandonment cuts deeper than any hunger or cold ever could. Tell me in the comments, what does this story make you feel? What would you have done if you were in my son's place? I want to read your words because they remind me that my story was not in vain. And as I share this with you now, I realize something. Yes, my son left me. Yes, my heart is broken. But I am still here, telling my story. And that means he did not succeed in erasing me.